on the folks joining us at the top of the hour. All right, hello, everyone. My name is Ray Peppley, and I am a college career counselor based in Meridian, Idaho, is next to Boise. And I work at a public high school here, really large public high school. And I am one half of the PNACAC Professional Development Committee. My other counterpart, Brittany Smith, is with the University of Montana, and she's joining us today. She'll just be in kind of the group of all the participants. Together, we host these meetings for College Counseling 101. So this is our 7th meeting, and I'm so excited about today's topic. It's one that I was telling Cynthia, our presenter, that I had just even 2 students this week come in, 2 juniors, and say, I want to know more about an international admission. And so I said, hold on, I know enough, I know a little bit today, but soon, on Thursday, I'm going to watch a video or be part of a video or a webinar, sorry, where an amazing host is going to share lots of resources with me. And so I was talking to Cynthia before we started, and she does have a lot of resources. So excited about this. So Cynthia Seidel is our presenter today, and she's with On Course College Counseling in, I'm going to try to do this, Sammamish.
Yep, that's right.
Yes. Okay. Sammamish, Washington. I felt pretty accomplished today to be able to say that. Lovely name though. And she is going to talk to us about what are the tips, what advice, what resource do you have to help any of our students who are asking about international admissions? And so we were talking before that she knows a lot, but today she's going to focus on kind of like, what'd you say, kind of baseline, or kind of just for those of us who are new to this. We're not going to go too deep of a dive, but just giving us general information about Canada, Europe, England, UK. So yeah, I'm excited for this. Before I turn it over to you, a couple housekeeping things. If you could hold your questions until about quarter till, or even you can post them like at bottom half of the hour, but we are going to wait and answer questions at about, I'm stalling because I can't remember the time zones. You're 9:45. Most of you are watching this at 9. I'm watching this at 10, but like at 9:30, 10:30. But at 9:45, 10:45, we're going to stop and try to answer your questions. So the other thing is, if you have to step away because a student walks in or something happens at work, you just need to step away. Please know that, as always, this is being recorded. And our wonderful Martha Wilson, who's her screen is blank right now, or black right now. She is our PNACAC tech chair. She's wonderful. She is behind the scenes helping us with all the technology, and she's the one that will send out the recording tomorrow. And then Cynthia was so sweet and generous and said that she would also be sharing these slides with all of us. So I really appreciate that, Cynthia. So without further ado, Cynthia. No.
All right. Thank you, Ray. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. Are you seeing my first slide?
Not yet.
Oh. Am I a co-host?
Martha.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Oh, that is weird. Sorry, everybody. This is something we didn't work on.
I know. I was thinking we probably should have practiced, huh? Let's see.
Still not seeing it?
No, still you.
Oh, okay. Here, let me try this.
There you. Oh, here it comes. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that, you guys. All right. There we go.
That's good.
So,
I feel your pain. There's nothing worse than trying to figure that out when you feel like everybody's staring at you, right?
So anyway, thank you so much, Ray.
I'm
always excited to talk about international options. And the way I got into this is I'm Canadian, if you can't tell. Married to a German, 3 kids with 3 passports apiece. So when it came time for our oldest to start looking at college options, even though we're in the Seattle area and she's only lived in the US, we started looking at some of the options for international, and they started making a lot of sense. So increasingly, I got into looking into international options and really understanding that part of college admissions. And ultimately, all 3 of my daughters did their undergraduates in Canada, and one is now doing her master's at Cardiff University in Wales. So yeah, I know firsthand, plus a lot of my students look at international. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of an overview, like Ray said, why international, affordability, some of the key criteria that you want students to to have, if they're considering international or if they come to you asking about it, practical things like the application timeline, a little bit about the regional profiles, types of programs you'll run into, and then just some final considerations and resources. So why international? Like, why would these kids even want to go international? The first criteria, and probably the most important, is that they have a pretty good level of independence. They're looking for personal growth and adventure. If they don't have those, it's a big ask for them to go international because they're going to run into the unknown, the uncomfortable, and they really need to be ready for that and embrace it. A lot of them are looking for an international student body, which some of the universities abroad are a third or even a half of their student body is from other countries. It's not just a small amount, it's the majority. Early degree specialization is another reason people would go abroad, especially in the UK, which we'll talk about. Regional specialization, so languages, international relations, politics, stuff like that could be really good reasons to choose a location in another country to study. One of the biggest is affordability and, of course, quality of life. The last two items on here are much more recent. And I've been having conversations with mostly the parents of students I'm working with. So seniors trying to decide where they're going to go. With everything coming down lately about the NIH canceling research funding, research grants to US universities, kids going into the sciences want to make sure that they're going to have research opportunities. So this is something that we've been looking at. It's a US thing. Internationally, there haven't been cuts to research funding. So that is something that a lot of kids are now considering, juniors as well, as they're building their college lists. Where can I get those opportunities to do research as an undergrad? And then, of course, the last one is fairly obvious, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, a lot of changes in the US as far as what universities are allowed to do with that, but that hasn't changed in other countries. And in fact, in many countries, all of these things are very much embraced. So safety is a big one. And I know this is very tiny print and hard to read, but I wanted to include it because it's a really good visual of the differences here. So I would say of one of the main things that all kids and their parents are looking for is safety. They don't want to go somewhere where their kids are going to be in a risky situation or dangerous. But for perspective, you can see number 2 up there in terms of the Global Peace Index, which just came out for last year. Ireland is right up there at number 2. Iceland, but kind of hard to find English-speaking programs in Iceland. So Ireland, New Zealand, Canada's number 11. Several other European countries are in the teens to the 20s. The UK is 34. And then I was looking and looking and looking for the US, and I finally found it right above Iran at number 132. So for me, when I saw this, this was a really good visual that put it in perspective. Just it's a big thing to go abroad or even to Canada for a lot of these kids, but from a safety standpoint, that's generally not something that you'd be worried about. One of the other reasons is a focused academic experience. So kids have had all of their Common Core stuff in high school. A lot of them know what they want to study and they want to jump right into it. So in the UK in particular, they get right into their major and they're not taking those other classes in other areas. They're really just focusing on subjects directly related to their major. Other opportunities are co-op programs in Canada, which are very, very common and across most majors. So depending on the university in Canada, it's quite easy to find co-op programs for even students taking courses in humanities or I'm trying to think business, not just engineering. In the UK, there's professional 1-year programs. So the degrees are 3 years in the UK. And in a lot of universities, you can add an additional year and work in your field. And that's part of the program. So research, again, coming up, built into the curriculum in many cases. There's also a very strong focus on employability. So UK universities, every time I'm at a UK university and they're talking about their programs, it's very striking how much the focus is on employability. So relating what they're learning directly to what they're going to do after they graduate, getting those hands-on opportunities, connections with employers, actual field experience, depending what they're studying. So that's a huge focus. Let's see. The program length, some of you may already have been aware of this. It really varies. So a 3-year degree in the UK is equal to an undergraduate degree in the US or Canada that's 4 years. It's the Bologna Accord that was a European Union agreement, I'm going to guess about 20 years ago, where those are equal. And they're equally recognized in the US too. So if a student gets a degree in the UK and wants to come to the US for their master's degree, it will be recognized. So the standard length of degree in the UK is 3 years. Elsewhere in Europe, it's 3 or 4 years, kind of depends on the school and the country. Of course, in Canada, it's like the US, it's 4 years. Let's see here. A master's degree is another really interesting one. It's a 12-month taught master's in the UK and in many parts of Europe, which is kind of nice. It goes through the 12 months and students graduate with their master's degrees. It's a little bit more intense, perhaps, than in the US, but it's very affordable and it's a lot quicker. So affordability, I'm going to show examples in a minute, but before that, a lot of questions people have are, okay, can I use all of these education savings funds that I've been putting money into for years and years? And the answer is yes. So 529 education savings plans do qualify for going abroad. And there's a list. So if you look at the Title IV listing of participating institutions, you can check if those institutions do accept or 529 education savings funds can go to them, but most do. Federal student loans, yes. Grants, no. So the US government's not going to give you money to go study abroad out of the country, but you can take out loans. Merit scholarships, like in the US, it depends on the university. Some award them automatically based on your application. For some, just like in the US, we have to do separate applications. And then if students are trying to look at the total cost and how they're going to make it work, their study permit, wherever they go, is going to allow them to work part-time during the school year, and quite often full-time during school breaks or summer. It depends on the country, and these laws change all the time. So you do want to check if that's something important to them, you do want to know. Likewise, it's pretty typical to be able to stay 2 or 3 years after graduating. But every country has their specific laws around that, and they change with different governments in different countries as well. So a couple of, or 3 things actually, that are very different that compared to students applying just in the US is tuition abroad. Very often it varies by major or by the number of credits. So for example, in Canada, business or engineering degrees tend to cost more than an arts degree. And that's largely because there are more credits, so more classes they have to take per year, et cetera. So that's something to be aware of. Exchange rates, right now the US dollar is nice and strong, which is great for those of us with kids studying abroad. Of course, that changes. So just when I talk to families about that, we build in some flexibility there to make sure that they're prepared for a budget that might have to be higher. Proof of savings requirements. This is something that even the US requires when students are coming from overseas. It's not unusual, depending on the country they're coming from, to have to prove that they have the funds or their parents have the funds for them to come and stay either for a year or 2 years, or sometimes for their whole degree. And that's so that they don't arrive in the country and they run out of money and then they can't afford to live there. So the US students usually have an exemption from that going abroad, but that can also change anytime. So that's just something to be aware of and check on a country by country basis. Okay, here's the fun one. I put this together just to kind of show, like the safety index, the annual cost of attendance in comparison. And I apologize, these are tiny again, so I'll just kind of point out a few of them. For a US student, if they get into USC, they're going to be paying almost $100,000 a year, usually without a scholarship. I mean, usually without a merit scholarship. And it goes down from there. And there's, as you guys all know, there's some very expensive universities in the US. And then we've got our WUI programs that are a great savings. Like I've got Boise State in here. I didn't even plan that, Ray. So Boise State, we're looking at about just under $40,000 a year for a WUI student. University of Washington in-state, since I'm sitting here in the Seattle area, a little bit less, in the same range. And then we start looking at some of these. Isn't this interesting? Emily Carr University in Vancouver. It's an art school. fabulous art school. Even for international students, you're looking at about 34,000 US a year total. Cost of attendance, not just tuition. The University of Victoria, depending on the major, it can also be in that price range. Bishop's University in Canada, that's up in Quebec. It's a liberal arts college, English taught, great school, and it's also in that price range. And then we've got Amsterdam University College. So that's the honors college of the University of Amsterdam and the Free University of Amsterdam. Free meaning not free money-wise, free of religion, from when it was founded hundreds of years ago. And then, of course, Freiburg. So those are some liberal arts colleges that are English taught, very similar to a liberal arts approach in the US in many ways, and they cost a fraction of the price. So I have had students who chose international purely because of the cost. When they looked at, like in particular, I can think of one family I worked with, 4 kids, limited budget, and all the kids went abroad because it just made sense financially. So there are some schools that are really expensive. So the University of St. Andrews, where the princes and princesses go, they can charge more, just like some of the US schools where if they have the demand, they can get the money. But a lot of them are more affordable. So I've got a couple of examples. UBC, since it's close by, international for sciences. So I chose one of the middle range price points. So sciences, an international student would pay about 35,000 US a year for tuition. And then of course, room and board and living expenses. Canadian, if you have a student who has dual citizenship, it doesn't matter if they've never lived in Canada. Canadian citizens pay Canadian tuition, and that's about 4,000 a year. You can see why my kids went there. And then the University of Victoria, I also used as an example, it's a little bit less expensive for international students, and Canadians about the same. So if we look at Australia and New Zealand, it's also a great deal. So Massey University and the University of Melbourne, great universities, very, so in fact, I believe New Zealand, every university in New Zealand is ranked in the top 100 in the world. So excellent universities. Tuition there would be about 22,000 a year US. And then Melbourne, 33 US. So really reasonably priced relative to other options. And then if we're looking at the UK, it varies again because of the university and how much they can, basically how much they can get away with charging. So how much in demand they are, how their reputation is. The interesting thing though is these degrees are 3 years long. So you're getting that huge cost savings just by only having to pay for it for 3 years. King's College London, so a big name, it would be 34,000 a year tuition for an international student. Also in London, the University of Roehampton is just under 20,000 a year US. So also quite affordable options. And then the European Union, like Canadian citizens, if you have a student who has dual citizenship in the EU, at a lot of universities in the European Union, like Amsterdam University College, they would get European citizen tuition. So 5,000 a year tuition to go to one of the best honors colleges in the world. It's a pretty good deal. So you can start to see why a lot of these families, especially if their parents or if their heritage is from other countries, they're very familiar with this and they know that this could be an option for them. Admission qualifications. This is often where it gets quite different. So in the US, where we're focused very much on GPA, you'll find that a lot of international universities, not Canada. Canada's like the US. They want to see a high GPA. But the UK will often, even at some of the top universities, they'll set a GPA requirement as a minimum of 3.0 or 3.2. What they're really looking for is test scores. And that's usually ACT or SAT, plus typically 3 AP scores, and then they can set what they are looking for. But the nice thing is, if a student meets the posted requirements on the webpage of that school, they're usually likely to get in. There are exceptions like Oxford and Cambridge because they're so competitive, or Imperial College London. But mostly at most universities abroad, if you meet the requirements, you're pretty likely to get in. They're looking for prerequisite classes in high school that are relevant to the major. And that's just common sense. If you're applying to biology and you've never taken AP biology, that's kind of a hard sell. But that's usually it's usually not an issue because if kids know they're interested in something, they're taking those classes. Test scores, again, highly relied on. Increasingly, UK schools, some in Europe, but more UK, are recognizing dual enrollment and running start credits. And that's a great thing because even usually before the pandemic, it wasn't considered. They wouldn't look at those. And then if a student didn't have AP or IB scores, it would be really hard to get them considered by UK schools. But now they have these additional options. So characteristics, which students are good candidates? Definitely being mature, self-sufficient, and independent. That's really, really important because they're going to be on their own. There is support from the universities, of course, but still they're navigating everything to live in a new country, getting a bank account, getting a new phone, all these little practical things, getting around. If they get sick, how do they access healthcare? All that kind of stuff. So these are absolutely essential. And down here I have can doesn't necessarily mean should. So of the students who come to me initially, say in 10th grade, wanting international, a lot of them don't end up even applying international because over time we go through all of this stuff and they start to realize, yeah, maybe it's not quite something I'm ready for yet. And there's always grad school or there's study abroad when they're in a US college. So there are tons of other options. So applications, these are just some of the details, and I won't go over all of these in great detail because you can use it as a reference later from the slides, hopefully. But just in general, Canada depends on the province and the university, how you would apply. Very few are on the Common App. So typically you'll be going through the institutional applications or in Ontario and British Columbia using their provincial application process. Recommendations are typically not required in Canada. UBC is an exception and a couple more where they want to have the contact information of a recommender. I have yet to hear a student come back to me and say, oh my gosh, I heard that they actually contacted my recommender. So I don't think they're doing that a lot, but they do want that contact information so they can contact them. Transcripts and test scores, increasingly they're accepting unofficial transcripts, which is really nice, at least through the application process. But that can be a little annoying, to be honest. When they do require an official transcript, some of them do, and then it can be, if they're requiring an official transcript, sometimes it does mean sending an official hard copy to the school directly from the high school. But increasingly, they're accepting unofficial, which is great. Australia, New Zealand, they're just looking at your grades and test scores. They're not looking for recommendations or essays or any of that stuff. UK, the interesting thing with the UK is they allow you to apply to a maximum of 5 programs. Programs meaning actually what they call courses, which is equal to a major. So you could apply to 3 majors at one university and 2 majors at another, and that's all you would be allowed. Or you can apply to 5 different universities, but 1 specific major at each. And it's nice because you don't have that arms race of applying to too many universities. But if you have students looking at the UK, it's good to know that they're limited to 5. And of course, it's highly recommended, as would be logical, that they have some what they call insurance choices, which would be likely that they're pretty sure they're going to get into. In terms of Europe, there are a few colleges there that use the Common App. They're mostly the American universities in various countries in Europe. They're typically basing admission on the official transcripts and test scores. So they're very much numerically driven. Some universities will require essays, interviews, and their own entrance tests. It just depends. But recommendation letters are usually not given. In terms of application deadlines, Canada does match the US in timeline for the most part. Depends on each individual university. The University of Toronto is always the earliest, and it's around first week of November is when applications are due there. And then some go into late January, some even go into February. But it's nice to try to have the kids looking at those early, and getting it in early is better because they do have rolling admissions and they can let kids know on a rolling basis. Like UBC tends to announce their admissions decisions about once a month. The UK, everything is due in mid-January. It has been late January for the last few years since the pandemic, and next year they're going back to mid-January for the application deadline. The exception in the UK is Oxford and Cambridge and all professional courses, which are due October 15th. And what drives that is those applicants have to interview. So any applicants to Oxford or Cambridge or medical school, dental, veterinary, law school, right out of high school, they are required to go through a much more extensive process, being interviewed, and that's why the extra time. So Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they all vary in timeline. Decision notification, for the most part, most universities are on a rolling basis, and they don't follow the US schedule. So it's not unusual, especially for some of the Canadian universities, University of Toronto, sometimes UBC and Waterloo, to not release decisions until May, even to US students who they know are waiting, because they operate more on the timeline of their own country, where applicants don't apply months and months in advance. So they're trying to weigh who to admit across their own country's applicants and from around the world. So that is something to be aware of. And it's not unusual to have a student have to deposit at their US university choice, and then lo and behold, 2 weeks into May, they get into UBC or something and it's their top choice. And then they've lost that deposit at the US school. On the other hand, I've usually seen them choose the international option if it's on a price point, because it's so much less expensive. Deposits in the US, it's not typically a huge amount. If you're an international student, your deposit in another country will be huge. So it can be in the thousands of dollars. So it's not something to be undertaken lightly. European Union, the other thing is, you need to know that if students apply to, like, say, IE in Spain, great school. If they get accepted, and they'll get accepted usually 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after they apply, so it's a pretty quick process. They're only given 2 to 3 weeks to make their deposit and commit. So that's something to let students know, is to time those applications a little bit later, unless they're sure that's their first choice. So if they want to wait and hear where else they're accepted in the US, it can be a really good strategy to wait and apply to those a little bit later. Okay, so how are we doing on time? A few more minutes. Okay, so I've got regional profiles, just some general info about each country or area. Canada, hugely welcoming of international students. Like UBC, it's about 33, 34% international students. And that doesn't even count all the Canadian citizens coming in from wherever they grew up in the world because of the cheap tuition. So Canada's almost entirely large public universities, with a few public liberal arts colleges, mostly in the Quebec area, mostly Quebec and the Maritimes. Excellent research opportunities. In fact, I get the Canadian higher ed rundown every day of what's going on in that space, and British Columbia just expanded their funding for higher ed in British Columbia, which was refreshing. Co-op programs, tons of co-op for a variety of majors. Excellent value even for non-citizens. Some of the differences are, in the residence halls, you will probably have a single room. It's very unusual to share rooms in Canada. The norm is to have each student in their own room, and they can share a bathroom or have a Jack and Jill style, but shared rooms are much less common. And less emphasis on Greek or sports culture. So the big football culture, you're not going to find that. Yes, there's football in Canada, but it's not anything on the level of what you find at a lot of US universities. So kids who are looking at that kind of college lifestyle probably wouldn't be that happy with Canada. Australia, New Zealand, obviously safe, welcoming of international, tons of international students, research opportunities. It's, again, like Canada, there isn't the big sports or Greek culture, but like in Canada, there's tons of stuff to do, tons of organizations and clubs and casual sports and stuff to do. In the UK, of course, top universities and reputations, also universities that aren't as elite. There are tons of universities and programs to choose from. English is a benefit it's a benefit that the UK is English both in the community and the classroom. I didn't mention earlier, but all of these programs that I've talked about in other countries are all English taught programs, even throughout Europe. So the harder part in Europe is you need to have a student be prepared that the community that they're in, if they're in Europe, not UK, will not be speaking English. So if they need a doctor or counseling appointment or something comes up, it could be in Dutch if they're in Holland. Are they, they have to be ready to either learn a little bit of Dutch or look harder and be prepared to really advocate for themselves if they need stuff in English. So in the UK, most programs are 3 years. So in Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland and England, it's 3 years. But in Scotland, undergraduate degrees are 4 years in length, and they have a little bit more time to narrow down their major. So looking at the EU, non-England, non-UK, students often choose that because of the culture, or quite often families who the parents are from Europe originally, it feels like home, they want to go back there. Very inexpensive, especially if they have EU citizenship, but even for international students without that. English taught programs at a lot of schools. Housing challenges are very real. In fact, Amsterdam is now saying, unless you have housing arranged, do not come, because there just isn't enough. It's very difficult in a lot of cities in Europe to find housing. So that's a real concern if students are looking at European universities. So types of programs, I'll go over fairly quickly so we have time for questions. There are a lot of different programs for students to consider. American universities in Europe. So these are not subsidiaries of an American university, but they are American style universities. So American University Paris is one of the first to be founded, and it's located in a beautiful area right by the Eiffel Tower. Small university, liberal arts, and of course English taught, and it's all American style. John Cabot in Rome, and on, like there are quite a few really good opportunities here. And a lot of the students will be American, but they also draw from abroad. So you're still getting that international student body, and of course, living in Europe. So reasons to consider these would be US accredited degrees. Because they follow a US curriculum type approach, they have gotten US accreditation. So those degrees are automatically accepted in the US and clearly understood by employers and other universities for grad school. Another option is a foundation year program. These are very common in the UK and Europe, and if a student doesn't quite meet the requirements to attend and to get into that program, they can choose to do a foundation year first. That can get them into the program that they really want to get their degree in. So it adds a year, but it's a nice transition as well. So if they're missing enough AP credits or enough AP scores to get in, if they're off by 1 or 2 or something, this could be an option at a lot of the universities. They're also, you just have to check the program, because a lot of those foundation year programs focus on English language ability, and kids coming from the US obviously don't need that. So you need to make sure that it's an academic foundation year that they're interested in, not an English language improvement one. So just a couple of examples. Roehampton has great foundation year programs that lead directly into the degree programs that they offer. Technical University Munich, it's very, very common, even for German kids in the US who speak German fluently growing up, to have to take a 2-semester program in Germany at TUM, which is one of the top universities in Germany, by the way, before they can get into the degree program. And that makes sure that they have all of the requirements that a German student would be getting before they enter in their, in the mainstream with everybody else. I mentioned earlier the professional year, also called a sandwich year or a placement year, gives students the opportunity to work after their second year of university. A year abroad is another option for that year in many programs. These are mostly in the UK. So it's very common to find these in the UK, and it gives students that relevant professional experience so that they're much more prepared to enter the workforce after they graduate. Another option is joint degrees, so spending 1 or 2 years at one college and the other 2 at the other. So there are a lot of options for this, and it can be 2 years at one and 2 years at the next, or it can be like St. Andrews, I think you start 1 year at St. Andrews in Scotland and then go to the College of William and Mary in the US, and then back to St. Andrews, different combinations. These are super competitive to get into for the most part, but they can be great programs for kids who are interested in having that opportunity. Another option is just to do the first year international. So you've probably had students apply to Northeastern, and instead of getting into Northeastern Boston, which is what they wanted, they've probably at times been offered the first year in London. So they call it the NU In program. And what that does is it helps Northeastern to manage their enrollment levels, and kids start in London and then go back to the Boston campus. Loyola Chicago has for years offered a first year program either in Rome or Ho Chi Minh City, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some really interesting options on a college by college basis. Another program that started a few years ago is Verto, and it's growing a lot. What it does is it takes the situation in the US where the first year of university is often a general year to take all your gen ed classes. So it takes that, and students who do the Verto program will take those gen ed classes with them abroad and then go right into second year at the university in the US. So they're applying to a particular university in the US as well as Verto. And if admitted, they do that first year with Verto, and they can choose from a number of countries and programs. It's growing a lot. Like there's some great options out there. And then they go right into sophomore year and continue on through the US for the rest of their degree. And then study abroad. So if it's too much to go abroad for the whole degree and it just doesn't make a lot of sense for where the student is at, of course, they always have study abroad options, which you guys are probably already more than familiar with. Okay, we're getting close to the time, but final considerations is it takes a little bit more planning just to consider international options. If they're able to visit before deciding, I highly, highly recommend it. Even in the US, I recommend it, but especially international. It sounds great when kids start thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be applying to Amsterdam or London, and wow, doesn't that sound cool? But then the reality can hit and they visit and the rooms are small because buildings are small, buildings are old. It's not like home. There are things that are just not as comfortable, things like that. It can be great and exciting for a kid who wants that, but it can also be a deal breaker. So there's definitely pros and cons. So I'm always trying to get kids to think about the end goal. Like, what are their reasons? Like, do they want to live there? And if they want to live there, why? What are the reasons? What do they find appealing about it? What are the benefits? So getting accepted isn't the starting point. It's the starting point, not the end goal. Okay, so I've just got a bunch of slides here on resources for you guys to use if you need any more information on these. And then there's just my contact info, and I will stop sharing so that we can talk about questions.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. I have taken several pages of notes. So I'd heard of Verto before, but I didn't know what it was, and that really helped me. I'm gonna have to check that out. So thank you. So many things that I'm going to be looking at later. So we do have a couple of questions so far. One question is it still only apply to one Oxford or Cambridge?
It is. Yep. You have to choose.
You have to choose between those two. Okay. And another great question. Are there any webinars that you recommend for families to watch about going international? That's something I'd love to know too. Any of your resources have any?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I do webinars all the time, like for the King County Library, Lake Washington School District, I've done some, or the Schools Foundation. I try to post them on my website when they're recorded. So take a look at my website. The last slide has that. Honestly, there's a couple that I haven't linked to on my website that I need to. That's a good reminder to me.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for letting us view those. Another question, when it comes to test scores, is it just AP tests or do they also consider SAT subject tests?
So subject tests, meaning the old ones?
The old ones, that's what yeah, would they have? I guess maybe if someone was older and has.
I mean, they used to, but I think we've aged out of kids who have taken those. I don't think there would be any more applicants. They did for a long time, but they've
but then those phased out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll let her ask again if I didn't ask it correctly. Okay.
Yeah.
So not a question, but a great resource to share with the group. There is a collection of international university representatives based in the US, North America called AIRR-NA. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Jared.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That is a really
Yeah.
good resource.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Jared. And then this is one of my coworkers, Kristen. She has a number of students interested in attending in Japan or Korea. Do you know resources for admission in that
I
region?
don't.
Yeah, I was.
I don't. Oh, yeah, that's a good question,
It
though.
is such a Kristen, save that because maybe that will be one of our remember that one because it might be one of our webinars next year because I have the same thing. I've had a few asking about Asia and I'm like, I got nothing.
Okay.
And it looks, I've tried to look it up. It looks very complicated. So, but maybe we can go to Jared's, his resource and find somebody for those students to help those students. And then another question is, are American universities as affordable as other international schools? Ooh, good question.
Oh, like the American University, Paris or Rome, et cetera?
Yes, yeah, American style universities, yeah.
So they'll be more expensive than some and less expensive
Than
than
other
others?
international schools.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. But they give scholarships too. Like they award pretty nice large scholarships to a lot of students. So they're definitely worth taking a look at. The real benefit of those that I found for my students is it's a softer landing. If they're coming from a US environment in high school, it's a lot easier to go there. Like American University, Rome, they actually have to, by law, check on kids every day that they're there, that they're in their dorm. Like they don't go and have a conversation with them, but they have to make sure they're physically there every day if they're under 18. Or actually, no, if it's under 19, I think things are 1 year older. So there's some nice protections there, just to make sure that they've got the support. There's a little bit more hand-holding in those schools than there would be if they're just plunked into like TUM in Munich it's very German. It is German. And there is no hand-holding. So that's one of the big appeals of the American universities is they're much more, it's a softer landing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It does. Oh, and then Martha posted your website in the chat. Thanks,
Okay.
Martha. I appreciate that. And then also we'll be posting Cynthia's slides tomorrow in the CC101 portal for everybody. I had a quick question. This maybe I should know this, but should they be, if they want to study abroad, when would be the process of getting a student visa? Or
That's after they're accepted. Yeah, that's a good
after they're
question.
accepted. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
after they're accepted, that process starts. It's usually pretty quick, but
Yeah.
of course, the sooner they start it, the better. And then they have that peace of mind. Student visa prices, by the way, have been going up quite a bit. They're hundreds of dollars. So that does add to the price, but it's still usually a much better deal. And I didn't put that in there because it really varies by country and it's changed. Like the UK really increased it a year and a half ago.
Okay.
But that's another.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean
Go ahead.
Do they still need a passport or they just use if they need both passport and visa? Okay. So one thing they could do now is, apply for a passport if they don't have one yet.
Definitely.
Great.
And actually, on that note, if I can add one more thing.
Yes, please.
If they're even thinking about going to a Canadian university, apply for a Nexus card now.
Oh, I did.
Because there's a 1 year wait to get it, and it makes such a difference at the border, whether a land border or the airport, and for all family members. Yeah.
Actually, thank you for reminding me that because I have a friend whose her dad's Canadian, and so he's up there. And she said the Nexus card was probably the most difficult thing to get just because of the timing. Like they have to get on it.
Timing and the logistics of
the logistics. Yeah, not to discourage anyone, but just that they would want to get on that quickly. Thank you for reminding me about that.
It is well worth it when you're sitting in line at the border for 3 hours and you don't have a Nexus card.
Yeah. We have another question. Catherine, can students without near perfect GPAs consider international schools and scholarships, or are they too far out of reach?
Oh my gosh, no, there are tons. I'm so glad you asked that. There are tons and tons of opportunities. In fact, I've had some kids who have low 3 point something GPAs go abroad, Canada or Europe or UK. It's just, they look for different things at different universities. It's not all GPA necessarily, especially in the UK. They don't, if you have a 3.0 GPA but you have reasonably high test scores, that's not a problem.
Yeah, I think the one student, I only helped one with the UK application, and she was low 3.0, but she was going for a business program. But she had all of this experience of working and having leadership at her work. And I think that helped quite a bit too, because it showed the interest and the aptitude, right? Was business minded, which I know you said earlier that some, students, it's okay if they can they'll show on their transcript they have really taken courses that lead to that interest area or that major or that program. But not all students do that, interestingly. Well, I'll have someone in my office that'll come in and say, I want to study business, but they've taken no business classes. So that would be, isn't that interesting? Yeah, it's just like an epiphany there. Junior year, I think I'd like to study finance, but they've taken no business courses while in school. So that would be a barrier for them, I think.
That could be an issue.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I didn't even consider it. Yeah, that's good. Oh, this is so great. Anyone have any last minute questions? We'll give it like a few minutes, or not a few minutes, but seconds. Let you type in there. Otherwise, you guys have Cynthia's information. So if you had any, maybe, are you okay with that if they
of course,
put you on the spot if they reach out, if anyone reaches out about questions? But thank you. Jared also had some good questions as well. A good resource as well for us. So I appreciate you, Cynthia. That's so great. And you guys Cynthia's heading to Wales. Is it this week or
tomorrow?
Tomorrow. Tomorrow, heading to Wales. I'm just a little bit jealous. Yeah. And
that's another thing. So the study in Wales fly-in, a lot of the UK universities have fly-ins for school counselors. And I think the IECs on these tours are the minority typically.
Yeah.
You guys. So definitely, if you're interested and you have a lot of students looking at international, apply for those tours, because they run usually annually, the same ones, and they're invaluable for learning more about the process, what's required, and of course, getting to know the area.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you for that plug too. Appreciate it. Well, thanks everyone for coming today. We have one more CC101 webinar next month, and that one is all about the arts application. So looking forward to that one as well. So thanks, Cynthia. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, enjoy the sunshine. We got the rain coming our way, but have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye.